Hello, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Longhouse, a show, I guess, about current events, politics, philosophy, maybe some rank punditry, culture, all from a Scandinavian and reactionary or libertarian perspective. Now, for me, it's been a busy week, but luckily I've been joined by more people who have answered the call, so to speak. And we'll start by doing a round of introductions. Luddic Path, welcome back.
Thank you. The Norwegian reactionary, recovering libertarian, back for round 2 on technology. So, I mean, my name is Luddic Path, so it's a kind of logical topic for me, and it's going to be fun to cut my teeth on this.
Yes, it certainly makes sense. Next up, we have one Jay Green River. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. I have been dragged in here because I'm Danish and I come out of the libertarian or reactionary, and then, of course, I'm going to talk about the sci-fi movie at the end of this stream a lot.
Right. We're looking forward to that. And lastly, we have Vingul, a new face on the stream as well.
Hello, glad to be here. Also glad, by the way, that Jay Green River is here, because I think it's more natural to speak English between Norwegians if there's a Dane as well. So.
Yes, I will try going forward to keep it at least Scandinavian and not purely Danish or Norwegian, but we'll see how that goes, given my audience. You know, for the first time actually this week in the analytics page on YouTube, it actually showed up that I have a Norwegian audience. This far, it's only been UK and the US. It's not showing me any hard numbers yet, but it's happening slowly. I want to start a bit by talking about my day today, or actually something that happened not too long ago, because it shows how stuck I am in modernity at some times. Because my wife came home earlier, and she told me that she had been driving behind one of those trucks that during the winter here in Norway, when it gets cold like now, we have trucks driving around salting the roads to make sure that it stays wet, I should say, instead of slippery. And the problem is that this can be a bit of a problem for the cars if you get a lot of salt on them. And my wife decided to pass by one of these, so our entire half of our car is covered in road salt and grime, which is not good for the paint job. And I wanted to clean it off, but something that I also do during winter is that you shut off any outside faucets, because if the water freezes, you can end up with the pipes exploding, which is not good. So I didn't want to turn on the water for the outside and get the pressure washer in order to wash off, some salt and grime from our car. So I figured, all right, I'll just go to a car wash, get it over with before the show starts. But unfortunately, once I arrived there, there was 10 people in line and only one car wash available, because I think the other one was inoperable for some reason. And with each of them taking about 10-15 minutes to wash the car, I wouldn't have been able to make it back to this to the show. So I'm sitting in my car and I'm thinking, man, there should be some kind of way I could just go on my phone and be able to see if there's a line at the car wash, because I don't want to have to drive 10 minutes to the car wash, then get faced with a huge line and then just having to drive back, as I did now. But then I thought, you know what? That's stupid. Why do I need to know everything about everything right when I want to, right? I mean, technology is nice, but what's the human cost of being able to always optimize, I suppose. And that's my plug into what we're going to talk about today, really, which is Luddism. But first, do you have any thoughts on general opinions, thoughts on technology, whether or not it's good or bad? I've been talking for several minutes now, so I'm going to shut up and drink some water.
So yeah, I can relate to the car wash. I had a similar experience. I didn't get as far as the app idea, but it's I think it's a similar predicament, and kind of the logic that we're in is just like, okay, we should just be optimizing, and why do I have to wait for anything at all? We should just, everything should just be tracked. And it's very quickly that you get into this World Economic Forum, kind of the fourth industrial revolution, smart city ideas, and you just forget to think about the downsides of it. So it's like one of the topics that I wanted to, at least that was the idea for this stream, was to come in with a perspective of Neoluddism. And of course, you have the original Luddite movement that was this sort of movement in Britain in the 1800s, led by this person who may or may not exist, named Ned Ludd. And it was more of like a workers' movement, in a sense, where they would form unions to smash specific textile machines, and because they felt like it threatened their jobs, threatened their livelihoods, and so on. So yeah, you have the photo there. I mean, it didn't end well for them. They ended up coming into conflict with the army. Many of them got the death penalty, and they got shipped off to Australia and other sort of prison colonies. And that was sort of, after that, it was just, okay, it's a very serious offense in England to destroy machinery. But it's and of course that's there's a lot of interesting Luddic thinkers. I mean, it's usually used as a pejorative, and that's the other head to this problem, is that there's a kind of dialectic, or a way that we discuss technology and the way that we approach technology in this society, that is a part of leading us down this kind of road to hell with this progressivism and the wokeness and everything that we have. Where it's basically the story that's being told is that technology equals progress, and progress is good, and the more progress we get, the better. The higher the living standards are, the better. And it's just it doesn't matter what the problem is, the answer is technology. So, but that's where you sort of the techno-pessimism comes in, and you start thinking maybe technology is not the answer, maybe technology is the problem. So for this stream, I really wanted to focus more on Neoluddism. That's kind of like this new movement where it's more about skepticism towards digital technology and the sort of digitization of society that we're seeing now with the smartphones, computers, the big data, artificial intelligence, the virtual reality headsets, and so forth. I mean, because the topic itself is so big, and in this sphere, you have thinkers like Evola, Martin Heidegger, René Guénon, that I know Walrus has done some videos on previously. Kaczynski is popular, so
yeah, Uncle Ted is certainly
Uncle Ted
in a lot of this. I will add that the progressive view on technology usually also goes hand in hand with the progressive view of history. It's this always forward into some sort of utopia.
Whig history.
Whig history, as it's called, yes. And the technology is very much, or it has become a part of this. It's hand in hand. But I think the only reason that it's become this way is because it's useful for the powers that be.
Yes. It is. I mean, technology. It's also a very broad term. I mean, we're talking about now just the. We're talking about just the digital technology, but there's so many topics to get into. Like, say, for instance, medicine. I mean, I know that's pretty like a little bit of a dangerous topic right now, but that's a form of technology. I mean, say so many of these, what you would call when people talk about bio-Leninism. You are talking about a lot of these groups in society that are being pushed forward and that are allowed to exist because of technology, whether it is like contraception, new abortion technology, antibiotics, different types of medication. Let's say, I mean, technology in terms of fixing, eyesight, technology in terms of fixing a lot of these physical hard limitations that would have been put on people in the past, that people are now quote unquote liberated from. And you have a lot, and the people who are liberated from this and sort of almost dependent on this technology are going to be like the biggest defenders of the current regime. So right now I'm just sort of parroting some of the points. I know that Morgoth had a stream not too long ago where some of these points were brought up, so I don't know
Right.
if you, yeah.
Well, there is something to be said about, and I think that's part of the Luddism aspect too. It's not about rejecting technology wholesale. It's about adopting a more realistic view, or an attempt at filtering what technology is actually good, capital G good, and what technology is bad or evil. Sorry, adopting everything wholesale is definitely not the way to go. And we can say that, okay, antibiotics to some extent have been a huge boon, but there's downsides, and it's I guess it's the old line, with great power comes great responsibility. It's about not allowing it to control you. And I'm sure all the Christians in the chat will be laughing at me because it's probably obvious to them, but in a sense, that's the way evil enters. It's through you becoming dependent on materialistic things. It's through you becoming sort of more and more intertwined with things you cannot let go of when the time comes.
Yes, and just going back to the previous stream where we talk about Norwegian history and the history of countries post World War II that starts receiving martial aid, then ended up joining NATO and becoming sort of a permanent part or client states in the American regime. What we're always seeing is that they're being able to kind of being able to sort of coerce and use power through these sort of introducing, credits, introducing new technologies, introducing kind of luxuries, and always using a carrot. They're not using the stick. The power is through, okay, here's the carrot of, okay, you want this credit to build up the country, you want the industrialization. Well, the next carrot is then, okay, well, you want to be rich as an individual, like you want to be able to move anywhere you want to go, you want to be able to spend money quickly. And then the next carrot is, of course, it's got a sexual liberation, and then they sort of keep introducing these new some of it you could call technologies. Other part of it is just a kind of soft power, but
yes, it's why I will always be a more brave new world appreciator than 1984 guy. Because it's the difference between ruling through fear and ruling through pleasure or enticement, I suppose.
Yes, and I mean, in the world we live now, we've lived in this dichotomous regime where you have the left-right dichotomy in politics, and the right is liberal and the left is socialist. And it's sort of, they're more kind of socialist progressive. They're not going to be this sort of hard. They sort of quit this kind of hardline communist thinking. So you get two narratives on technology, and that's kind of like the Moldbug two-story states. If you have one story, then it's either true or false, and if you have two stories, then one of them is true and one of them is false. So the progressive story is then, like we talked about, the Whig history, the history. I mean, it's just getting better. It's just everything is going to be. We're moving towards some type of some people will say it's a singularity, like you have this sort of Ray Kurzweil types, some of these Silicon Valley types who believe we're moving into like becoming techno gods, and everybody's going to be able to just have these fantastic interesting lives. And then you have the other part of the political discussion that is the liberal side that says technology is basically neutral. It's just okay. With new technology coming, well, it's up to the individual how they're using it. Smartphone addiction. Well, it's the individual that's choosing to sit on the smartphone, right? So apparently, it's a good thing because that's their economic choice to spend sort of 12 hours a day on the smartphone or sit and do gaming for 20 hours a day. So they can see no wrong in that, and there's really no counteracting force here that's sort of actually creating a consistent, coherent story about why technology is actually quite dangerous.
Right, and it's also ignoring the past for having, different or actually quite good technologies without realizing that civilizations have come and gone who were, in a sense, quite advanced, but sometimes actually held back on purpose. And it's the progressive view of it all, and it's ever forward and unto I don't know what, the Matrix or something. And what is funny is as someone working with computers, working in IT, you quite quickly realize, in a sense, how far we are from certain things, but how close we are to others. And that makes it very fun when a lot of the, should we say, quote unquote thought leaders in Silicon Valley make these sort of grand claims about where we're headed. I mean, maybe for you, because you're a quadrillionaire, but for, the random guy who's retweeting your post, I mean, he's gonna die alone with a VR headset on. That's my view of it, at least.
Yeah, I didn't put this on the agenda, but I have. I had to read books like The Fourth Industrial Revolution and The Great Reset. So you have like the Klaus Schwab crew to sort of get a little bit more into their ways of thinking. And of course, these books are a lot more boring than you'd think they were, considering some of the memes and the way that they're being presented. Like, it's a bit more sort of James Bond villain-esque, but these books are sort of surprisingly boring, and they're more sort of tailored to
it's the banality of evil, really. As long as it's it's a managerial way of doing things, so it's going to be boring. It's not about, I can't say that, that's too spicy. It doesn't matter if people die as long as we hit our targets, because that's what matters. That's the metric that we're working for, and it's the reign of quantity, really, to use a Guénonism. I'll try to drag in, does anyone else, Green River or Vinkel, do you have any perspectives on what we've been talking about? It's been quite a while.
Yeah, I do, but it's coming from a different point, right? Because
Sure.
My concern is less about, is technology good or is technology bad? My concern is that we have these guys in the World Economic Forum, and if the way I see it is that they are just grasping out or grabbing out for as much power as possible. They don't care where it comes from. They just want power. That's what it's about for them at the end of the day. So if they are grabbing after everything that just looks like power, then the only way we can compete with them is by, well, maybe not doing the same, because you could perhaps go for a little less power and a little bit more righteousness, right? But you need to be able to field those 100 men more with rifles or drones or whatever it takes.
Yes,
in order to compete. So it's all good to say that technology is bad, but at the end of the day, if it gives you power, you need it.
that is very true, and I think, in a sense, that's what I'm trying to say when I say that, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, technology is inherently bad and we shouldn't do it. It's about understanding the consequences before you sort of adopted wholesale, I suppose. It's about the careful use.
So I'm
I think
completely on board with it. So I hope I didn't give the impression that I sort of just generally I live in a cabin in the woods and in some sort of hut, and I just grow my own food, because my life is I assume pretty similar to the walrus. I also work as a developer, and it's much closer to the bugman lifestyle, even though I've been able to remove myself from that. But it is, I mean, at least for me, not Luddism in terms of we're just going to reject the technology, but really have a conscious understanding of what this technology is actually doing. And we're getting back to power, as Green River is talking about. And like the way technology is working now for us, it's not making us more powerful. In many ways, making us less powerful in terms of, the sort of social media addiction, like porn addiction, making us dependent on the system. I mean, we can definitely use technology. Like we have to use technology. There's just no question about it. I would just sort of refer back to one of these sort of Morgoth videos where he talks about this sort of civilization, when you play Civilization, and like in the beginning, you can have different civilizations, but in the end, every civilization ends up looking like the same sort of techno grid, because you have to go into these arms races with technology. And I'm completely realistic on those points. But in my terms, it's really more about just recognizing that these technologies that we have in our lives, they are, they create comfort and sort of make us feel comfortable, and they make us feel good, but they're also making the quote unquote enemy more powerful. So
yeah, that's for certain. Okay, well, if we're looking at it from that angle, I'm with you completely, right? Not a moment goes by without me thinking about that, but I just think it's dangerous to think about it in dichotomy, in the form of technology, good or bad.
Yes, I think a lot of people, at least in on the right in general, and I'm not even going to talk about people like us, have this sort of distrust towards digital technology specifically these days. And I suppose that's warranted, but there's also a way to use it for good. But a lot of people are, and myself included, are thinking, maybe digital technology was a mistake to a certain degree. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day about something. We were talking about some website for a company he was using, and this guy he's very savvy computer-wise. He doesn't work in IT, but he's a Linux guy, so to speak. And in the end, we both sort of came to the conclusion, almost as a joke, that the GUI was a mistake. If you had kept the barrier to entry on computers, maybe you wouldn't have the high amount of control that you have today. It's just a funny thought that popped into my head. I've spent probably 2 minutes thinking about it, so please slaughter me.
So we stay in the command prompts. We basically have to go back in time and murder young William Fence to stop the GUI from from spreading. So Green River, did you have a take on this?
Well, no, not outside. I think that you're right. If it had just been the command prompt, then we would have not seen the control we had today. But I come from the 3D industry, and I can tell you, one of the reasons that user interfaces are improving is to cater to the IQ 80, right? Those that are really dumb.
Right.
That is why it's improving. It's
in a way to pull like a semiogogism, I suppose. The you can almost pull like a parallel to the Bible being written in Latin. I mean, some things have societal effects when you make it available to everyone, and maybe the computer is the same way, actually, or digital technology.
Yeah, this is something that I have thought about a lot because I sit and work with GUIs and develop GUIs for people, and it's not just the moving from the command prompts to the GUIs, but you could look at the difference between like these sort of 90s desktop application GUIs until the sort of mobile app or web app GUIs that we have today, which I mean, pardon my language, but they look like they're made for retards. It is like and some of them are too. Like you have this sort of, I don't know what the sort of universal utforming, this kind of concept that okay, well, someone with like 80% blindness should be able to use it. Your grandmother who's 90 years old should be able to use it. So you just have these GUIs where it's just like some text and two giant buttons, and they just click back and forward. It's all just super simplified to capture as much of the people as possible. And I mean, I guess this could be a bit of a segue to go into this digitization efforts, because everybody here is a Scandinavian.
Yes, in a second, I'll see if Vingul, did you have any takes on this before we move on?
Well, I didn't have any take specifically on what you said at the end there, but I mean, I just have a visceral reaction to the thought of AI myself. I sort of take the I don't know, am I allowed to say this? Like, I take the Butlerian jihad line on this, I guess.
I think you can. I don't know. Can you say that part? I don't. It's too late now.
I mean, it's a fictional concept from Frank Herbert's Dune, so yeah, it should probably be okay. But and I don't know if you guys have read Dune, but they just like they get to the. I think Morgoth has talked about it in this way before. Like they get to the utopian Star Trek utopian fantasy, and they end up rejecting it entirely. Like they ban all artificial intelligence. So
see, I did read some of it. I had to do it because I saw the new movie, and I found it. I actually quite enjoyed it, so I tried to get a bit into the Dune universe.
Okay.
At least to elaborate, at least from what I read on the wiki, is that they had this future where the artificial intelligence is doing everything for them, but they sort of realized that the artificial intelligence had started to abort healthy children. And when they figured that out, they basically went on this kind of crusade to just smash every last bit of digital technology in the universe. So that's why Dune has this type of aesthetic that it has. Like they have technology, but you can only have dumb technology. So like analog tech, and that's why you also have these people like with these sort of funny bald heads, and like they roll their heads back into their eyes and do equations,
right,
because they have to be like human computers. So
they're the mentats, so they
Right.
operate like human computers. Yeah.
Well, just
by
real
the way,
quick, before you go on, Herlock Sholmes asked if we're talking about the user interface. Yes, the GUI is the user interface. Sorry, go on, Vingul.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that as well. I didn't know what the GUI was. But
okay, yeah.
I don't know how many pop cultural references I want to throw out there, but anyway, I haven't seen the recent Dune filmatization, but I actually really love David Lynch's version, even though it's way too short. Like, you had to cut it. He didn't have Final Cut. But anyway, I guess my skepticism to AI goes all the way back to like my late what do you call Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, those guys. Like, Sam Harris used to talk about AI and how once it reaches a critical mass, as it were, in terms of intelligence, it just skyrockets and becomes almost omniscient, not omnipotent, but omniscient. So of course it's connected to the grid, to the internet, and like, I don't know if technical piece of, like, abstract piece of machinery, if you will, can have consciousness in that sense, but it could start taking decisions for all of humanity. So I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Yeah, but you do see that a lot already. Just to the first point, because I do pay attention to these guys like Sam Harris, and I mentioned Ray Kurzweil as well. So depends on how much they're into this. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm just this is a sort of there's a lot of intersection here between what you call like singularitarians, so the sort of the people who believe in the techno singularity, where the artificial intelligence becomes a sort of god that just continuously improves upon itself until it's just thinking so fast that the only way you can understand how fast it's going is that you need to enhance yourself with the sort of brain technology. But I mean, if their predictions were true, we're going to get to that point in history like really, really quickly. We're not like many years away from this type of singularity, according to, I mean, you can look at books like something about the singularity from Ray Kurzweil, The Singularity Comes or something. I'm going to see if I can Google it. Let's see. Singularity is near. That's the book that he has. And transhumanism, I guess, is the, let's see, did we lose the walrus?
Whoops.
Oh, there it is.
I'm back. Okay,
no
sorry
problem
about that.
But these sort of transhumanists and the singularitarians, there's a lot of intersection between them and like this very specific group that is sometimes brought up. I don't know what the connection is, but this sort of transhumanist movement is just like, it's just almost all this kind of the merchant class. But I am a bit skeptical of it. Because you see with some of these artificial intelligences, I remember reading some articles because I'm paying attention to it as a developer, where I've been a part of some projects that are using artificial intelligence to solve certain problems. And I mean, where we're at now, you basically have, it is the same as basically teaching a computer to have intuition about something. Like let's say you have a person who's a real estate agent who's been a real estate agent for maybe 20 years, and he's seen so many transactions that he can sort of guess where he can make a good profit or what a house is going to go for before he actually knows the information. He can just look at it and just sort of guess, okay, I can sell this for 4 million in 2 days. And the idea with the artificial intelligence is that you can use a sort of combination of statistics and mathematics to train a computer. Like, it takes a lot of computing power, a lot of processing power. Uses a lot of electricity, and you can sort of train that to gain the experience of someone who has been doing something for maybe 20, 30 years. Like you teach it to play chess, or you teach it to do these sort of limited games. But that's sort of within like a limited set of data. And even now I see that they're having problems with it because there seems to be a decline in our AI over time. Like the prediction was that they're just going to keep getting smarter, but I've seen a lot of them now where it seems like in the beginning, when they're putting them into production, they're producing a lot of good info. Like, say with your search results, it's giving you the Google search, for instance, it's using an artificial intelligence to sort of guess what you want to see. And in the beginning, usually these algorithms will give very good results, but over time they actually degrade, and it's not very well understood why that happens. But they seem to just be spitting out, say they're in production for like a certain amount of years, and they're spitting out garbage. So
I think it's
you have an experience
a
with
digital
that,
form of. I don't have any direct experience, but I have a take. I think it's a digital form of like bioleninism, in that the humans who are taking care of an AI are having a sort of negative feedback loop of quality on the algorithm.
Yeah, you have in
deciding what is good results and what is bad results, and selecting trading data, etc.
This startup company, I don't have the article here, who were just doing this. They were trying to train an artificial intelligence to look at X-rays. And they were sort of, they were matching X-rays with personal data over like this data set of millions of patients. And like they could basically, like this artificial intelligence could then guess with 100% accuracy the race of the person who did the X-ray, even on a sort of as granular detail. Like they could look at a hand, and the artificial intelligence could then guess the race, like the self-reported race of that person, with almost 100% accuracy. And they basically had to detrain the artificial intelligence and sort of start programs on how to stop artificial intelligence from becoming racist. I think Moldberg has some stuff on that stuff, but it's pretty funny. They have to make them dumber to not notice these things.
Nordanon says, do you think they made them dumber because some AI like Tay, for example, were racist?
Well, yes.
I would hesitate to call Tay an AI fully, but in essence, yes, that's what I'm saying. But on multiple levels.
Yes. So, I mean, they have to just, how do you make sort of a cold artificial intelligence that is just like this computer? It runs on pure logic. How do you make that understand wokeness? Like, or some intersectionality? It's just, it's almost impossible.
All right. Should we move on to the next topic at hand?
Yes.
Sure.
It's going to be a bit of the similar things, but we want to touch a bit about digitization. And when we say digitization, we mean the digitizing of operations and actions, I suppose, in corporations and in everyday life. Thinking about changing a process from your form is filled out on a piece of paper to it's now a web form, and you can deliver it to your doctor before you go to the clinic, for example. And in, I suspect, a lot of the Scandinavian countries, Green River can back me up, but at least in Norway to a large extent, digitization has been very, very popular, and is probably the reason why I chose to get a degree in software development, because I figured I'll get a job, I can get in, get as much money as I can, and just get out before it gets me. Hopefully that works out, but we'll see.
Well, it has it has a long history, right? I mean, back in the 90s, you had the paperless society, right? So now we're just improving and optimizing that paperless society under a new name with digitalization, right? That's how it is now, and that is happening worldwide. So that's all I really have to say about it.
It seems to be happening worldwide, certainly. There's a big, Luddick was talking about this. It usually comes from the same people, of course. They go to the same conferences that tell them that digitization is the good shit and everything needs to be in the cloud. And then they go back home and they tell the IT department that everything's going to be in the cloud. And then before you know it, the Microsoft Corporation basically owns all your data. And but it's easy, right? It's what we tell ourselves. What I do want to do, or unless you have more you want to say, Luddick.
Just quick, can you bring up Nordanon's question there on VIPs?
Yes, that's VIPs is a payment service, isn't it? I think Denmark has a Danske Bank version. It's called like mobile pay or something.
Yeah. Just some quick thoughts on this. Like the first point is that like payment services is not sort of a given. This is a luxury that you have from being in Scandinavia, and especially in Norway, that it's so easy to use these payment services because you have a country like the United States. I mean, I know they have Venmo now, but they have a very competitive corporate culture where it's always corporate espionage and all these sort of lawyers that are constantly trying to take patents from each other. So it's hard to get a sort of cooperation there. And you have countries that are highly technological like Japan, but they're just completely anti-payment technology. Like they still use cash for everything. So it seems like to be uniquely for the Scandinavian countries and especially Norway that they use a lot of this sort of VIPs, these things. So a couple of years back, I was in Oslo to be at a conference, sort of tech conference, and they had the CEO of VIPs who was just jumping around on stage and talking about all the opportunities, and like his argument was basically like, okay, we have to get a monopoly, and that's what happened because you had different competing payment services, and So Vips basically became like a government monopoly because they were afraid of Apple Pay and these sort of foreign competitors. So Vips is like the Norwegian government's monopoly technology to keep Norway on its feet in the private sector, kind of like Huawei in China. But like honestly, the feeling I sat with after listening to that Spas run around on stage and talk about how everything was going to be digitized, it was just I just wanted to go like full Kaczynski mode. I wanted to like mail this guy a packet of something. Okay, we'll just stop there. But
flowers.
Yeah, just the flowers and some chocolates.
I will say that it's one of those quirks that you see in a lot of the Silicon Valley companies and how they sort of keep a lid on a lot of these things or keep the power centralized. I worked a bit for one of the competitors of Vips, which was called Mcash. It was a bit more business focused, and in the end they just got bought out because Vips had more powerful backers, so they just straight up bought them out and then just shut them down and absorbed the people working there. And then in the end, there's only one actor on the market, and now it's controlled by the state. But ostensibly it's a free market, right?
Yes, especially in the global situation, that's the only way this works. So a lot of this sort of classical economics, it only works on a nationwide level. It doesn't work when you talk about companies that are bigger than governments. It throws the whole thing out of whack, so you have to create government monopolies.
Can I just ask, shout out to Mongolian Doggerland, by the way. He is asking, is it tied up to the dreaded bank-ID, mitt-ID? But as I understand it, it also goes through DNB, right? Norwegian bank.
Yes, and you don't have to use the ID services if you don't want to. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's connected to your ID,
Yeah. So I'm showing my ignorance here, but does the Norwegian state have like more than 50% of the shares in DNB, or is it just state owned? Because I mean, I thought it was just a DNB venture.
No, well, it originally was, but they changed some of it a couple of years ago. Hang on, because Vips technically is okay. That's something for another time. I would have to research it a bit more because they went private a couple of years ago, and then the bank keeps, I think, 25%, but some of the others are connected to. We're getting into the weeds here. We'll deal with that later, maybe.
Never mind.
They seem to have a very sort of diverse mixture of owners, and yes, BlackRock is in here.
Of course,
of course as well. And I mean, I can't get my head around it. Like when you look at even these big Norwegian companies, like the media companies and the banks, it's like BlackRock just has like 2-3% of all of them. So. But I assume the government comes in here, but a lot of these things have just been privatized where, there's maybe the government has some fund that owns this through another fund and so on. But there are a lot of private owners as well. But it is this sort of private-public partnership thing that's going on. As far as bank-ID, I mean, this is, if we're moving forward in the digitization discussion, reason that Norway has some of this digital infrastructure is because the government offers either free or very sort of cheap common set of services where like it's bank-ID, but ID-porten, I guess would be one of them. So I'll see if I can find
it's a sort of like one central hub for logging into government services, basically, and you can use that for your banking as well. While you look for that, I want to go into something else before we go into identity stuff, and we're going to do some rank punditry, and we're going to watch a Twitter video together.
Nice.
Just let me get it up. This is a bit for fun, but it hits on some of the things we're talking about and some of the things that I feel that I brushed on accidentally in my Reign of Quantity video, or the end of craft, as I called it. Just a moment. Let's see, can I bring this up? Ooh, bright mode. All right. I don't know if you guys have seen any of these videos. It just popped up on my feed one day, and I want to play it. There's some horrible music, so I'm just not going to play the music.
Just explain a little bit to lead me into this.
Of course, this is an ad first and foremost. Like this is an advertisement for a bunch of Korean or Chinese products. I'm not quite sure. Maybe we'll be able to see some labels going in. And so, of course, this woman is basically showing off a bunch of products. But what these products are, I would say, is just trash. Straight up. It's all of these, like, it's like micro optimizations. But all of this is just crap. And it's just cluttering the planet, so to speak. So I'll play a bit. I'll just jump past the first part. All right, here, let's go. So here she puts, this is like, it cleans the water and the tomatoes. It uses like electrolytes or something to like clean like dirt off of tomatoes, which is like, just run it in water. And it's, you know, I'm sorry, but food grows in dirt. You know?
Yeah, I mean, this lady is obviously not Norwegian. Like, we have clean tap water. I don't know which third world country she's in.
So just pause a little bit. What was that? Is it supposed to heat the jacket?
I don't know. I don't know.
Preheated when it comes off the rack. Okay.
I think it's some sort of steamer. I don't know what that is. She puts her glasses into some kind of water. She makes food. That's fine. I mean, she's drying the. Like what? Hang on. Why do you have to? What is this? And why do you have to turn it on? That's my thought. And then in her fridge, she has something for her eggs. And everything, that's the thing, like everything here is just, you know, you could just make an omelette, right? You don't have to do this. You don't have to buy a product to make an omelette.
Like all of this stuff just makes things more difficult in the end. Like, it's just more stuff to have lying around in your house. Like, just
that's what I feel.
Just cut your tomatoes and eat them. Like, it's not
right.
hard.
I have seen
just a bit of fun, really. Sorry.
Some of these videos myself. There's usually these Koreans who like this stuff. Where I feel like, you know, it's seems to be still being big there to kind of show off the kitchen equipment that you have. I think that's something that the Americans in the 1950s would try to impress each other with. But I have seen this sort of this thing like with people I know, and you deal with colleagues and other people, like they like to show off their electric cars. Tesla is very popular in Norway. I think it's one of the few countries where that's actually been a success. And they will sit and show each other these videos of like the stuff that their custom Tesla can do. Like they can do sort of light show where they put on a song and the Tesla is just going to do like this kind of dance light show thing. And I think like what a sort of decadent, stupid thing to do. I apologize to people in the comments. I mean, if there's Norwegians watching it, I'm probably offending some Tesla owner. But like you're making your car do a kind of like song and dance for what reason exactly? I don't know. But this is like they think this is like the coolest thing ever. So
yeah. All right.
I mean, this I just want to say this kind of thing is very symptomatic of the older generations. I feel like probably some young hip people like are excited when they see TikToks or Instagram videos about this stuff, but I just noticed like the boomer generation in particular, they go for like having your microwave connected to the Wi-Fi and stuff, and I just I don't get it.
Yeah,
That's all.
it seems so completely useless to me. Like I don't know if you've seen the show Silicon Valley, but they have an episode there where they make fun of these sort of smart fridges. Like, and that's another thing that I think is just completely useless. Like, you have a fridge that's connected to the internet, and it's supposed to tell you that, well, your fridge is empty. There's a notification on your cell phone, the fridge is empty, you have to buy things. Oh, there's almost no milk left, you can just open the fridge and look at what's in there. But people, they keep buying this stuff, they keep funding these and seeding these kind of accelerators for startups to make this what's in my view just absolute garbage.
Yes, I'll be back in a moment. I have some technical issues, and then I'll show another video. 2 seconds. Sorry about this.
So I can just keep continue on a bit of the rant there.
Oh, yeah, I had a counterpoint, so I can just jump in here. Well, that thing where you guys didn't know what she was turning on with the knives. I think what it is it's a holder for knives, so you don't have to clean them through a washing machine. You just put them down in that water, and then they get cleaned in the water.
Nice.
I think you can just wash your knives.
You can, but is it easier just to put it down in that holder, or is it easier to put it to the side? So I can see.
It's not about what's easiest. It's about the cost to your soul in Green River.
Well, that's fair.
The spiritual act of cleaning your knives.
I'm personally I'm looking at it a little bit different than you. I agree on the video is ridiculous with all these gadgets, etc. That doesn't make your life easier. But what you could have is someone who really fucking hates to clean knives, and then you buy that one machine, right? But it's the combination that makes it facepalm moment. I think it's not so much the
yes, of course, it's not the individual things. It's everything together. And in a sense, I was talking to Luddic before I think it was the past stream about because he made a comment on a video I made called of Work and Bugmen, where I talked about an acquaintance of mine and I described sort of a bit of his life, and he said that like you described like 90% of other developers I know, and that sort of character I created was a little bit of maybe 2-3 people I know, in order to sort of make the point that if you put this all together, it gets pretty ridiculous. And okay, sure, maybe there's only a couple of people in the world that live like this, but that's the direction we're heading, is my point.
It absolutely is. That is true.
All right, I have another video which is hitting probably a bit harder, hopefully. We'll see if I can play it here in my files. Oh, we might even have audio now, actually. Let's see. Can you guys hear this?
I'm hearing it.
Yep.
Yes.
Closer, please. Hi, love. How are you?
I'd probably demonetize myself with this, but that's fine. I don't have monetization anyway. But we're probably been shadow banned. But what I don't like about this is not necessarily directly the technology aspect of this. It's more the implication and the direction as well here. And I don't remember where I wrote it. I think it was on Twitter or something. Or was it a Telegram? Where my take on sort of technology today is kind of like the thing Cyberpunk gets wrong is basically just how cool everything is. Everything else is pretty much correct. It's the same thing. It's just a bit more boring, and it's been gamified.
Yeah, it's a gay, I guess. I'm sorry to say, it's like fake and gay technology, gamification, augmented reality. I mean, it made me think of these sort of David Cage games like Heavy Rain, these kind of walking simulators that your life is just going to be that. It's just going to be this kind of sluggish thing where you're just kind of nudged in the direction the regime wants you to go by sort of gamified reality. So
yeah, and it's you put on the VR glasses or something, and everything's going to be fine. And yeah, what is that that old game where you play like a megacorp and you're fighting against other megacorps, and you hire like squads of soldiers and mercenaries, and you just gun down people. Syndicate, right? And in Syndicate, isn't that like a thing where like the people are like, they don't notice you gunning people down in the street because they're just walking around with the VR glasses on, and it's, instead of your mercenary shooting someone, it's like a guy petting a dog.
I don't. I think there was some kind of upgrade or something like that you could get that did something along those lines, but it wasn't a natural part of the game. No. Oh well, of course it's a part of the game, but I meant it wasn't a part of the starting premise.
Right. So yeah, if there isn't any more takes on this, I figured I just wanted to share it for fun, and so we can move on unless you have something to say.
I think it might be time to pull in Arne's quote here, if you don't mind.
Sure, if you have translated it.
Yeah. So this is from 1973. The book is called Ecology, Community, and Lifestyle in English. So he says, I just like the way he writes this. He says, human beings make of themselves domestic animals, ruled by an impersonal administrative machinery. Two tertiary business pathways dominate: entertainment industry, including sports, not outdoor activities. By the way, Arnes was a mountain climber, so an outdoorsman for sure. Entertainment industry and support service. We make of ourselves patients and clients. And I think the last part there is very relevant, of course, to our situation right now. Like, we are patients to, you know what I mean, and clients already, but certainly if they bring in, what's it called, mandatory payments from the state, everyone gets paid an equal amount.
UBI,
universal basic income. Yeah, I mean, this is gonna, I think, make us more dependent on the state than ever. Like, we just become perpetual clients, sort of. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They just pay off their slaves, and well, you're not gonna leave the system anyway. Like, you're reliant on it.
No, I guess I've been thinking about that too, because it seems like this is something that shows up in like the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the book by Klaus Schwab. He talks about that the state, it's not going to make decisions anymore, like on behalf of the people. It's just going to be a service provider. You're just going to get this is healthcare services and welfare services and guidance counseling and so on, and it's not going to have any opinions on anything. So you're just going to go, I want to have like gender reassignment surgery, well, here you go, sir, just walk right in. And I mean, in terms of the UBI payments, in the beginning, I was sort of like from this, I don't know what his name, like Murray something. It's a Douglas Murray, the bell curve guy.
Yeah. Sorry. Douglas Murray is the
gay conservative, maybe. Who's the
I know Charles Murray.
Charles Murray.
Yeah. Charles Murray, who had a sort of, I mean, he was like in favor of UBI on a sort of more economic conservative basis, and I thought, this is a nice take because it's more efficient than the welfare state and so on. But and you think that, okay, well, then maybe dissident people can just kind of speak freely because you get money in your account and you can just have opinions. And we're going to be able to have a much freer society where people can actually use free speech. But it's like, well, they can just cancel you from any of these services. They can just like block your credit card, and all these private corporations can just stop you from using these things anyway. So like the UBI is almost worthless. Like, I mean, we'll give you the money, but the companies, all these sort of free, the quote unquote free market, they choose not to have you as a client. So I don't know, Walrus, do you have a take on UBI?
Well, nothing that you haven't said. I think our energy is better focused elsewhere than fighting UBI. It's better to build alternative money sources, so to speak. Anyway, I think we should move on to... Did you want to talk about digital IDs, or should we go talk a bit about parasocial relationships?
See, I wanted to include the parasocial relationship thing, but I realized that, it's not a particularly digital phenomena. I think the digitization has accelerated the parasocial relationships, but I mean, you had it already with the radio, this kind of one-sided thing where everybody's just tuning into this radio personality and everybody knows who he is. But with the digital world, it's become a lot more sort of customized. Like they have this sort of OnlyFans. So I mean, of course, we're getting into the porn stuff now, but I mean, say with YouTube as well, like people who sit in with these super chats and they're sitting to follow these YouTube celebs, and it's just this completely one-sided thing, and they're sitting and well, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on it?
No, not really, other than what you said. In that sense, I should probably just stop doing this show because I don't want to become parasocially responsible for anyone. And if you're listening to this, don't.
It is almost inevitable, right? So, I mean, even in this sort of dissident rights sphere, I would think that I have like a parasocial. I feel like I kind of know Morgoth or something, or like the Dave Distributist. These people have no idea who I am, so
right, because you tell someone, it's like you tell someone a piece of data about your life, and then they sort of infer a whole sort of personality out of that, because in a sense that's what you do in a conversation. That's how you build friendship with someone. You get to know each other, and then you sort of like the outline of the person in front of you metaphysically sort of starts to take shape more and more into your friend, right? But when it's just purely one-sided, that becomes very dangerous when that person that gets formed isn't real. Like, me in reality and me on the stream is not the same person. But this isn't connected directly to technology. I think you could go back to that. This is probably a problem with the radio, right? So this isn't anything new, and I'm not sure if we should spend any time on it.
We don't need that much time on it. Alternatively, we could have tried to review the movie Her from 2014 with Joaquin Phoenix.
That's something we could do in the future, yeah.
But I don't have anything else on it.
Okay. Green River Bingle. This isn't necessarily the most exciting point we had on the agenda.
Really.
The parasocial reality thing?
Relationships, yeah.
Relationships, sure. I'll let Jay Green River go first, and then I did have one thought at least.
Well, I have had the honor of the last 3-4 years to run academic agents community, and I've had a lot of experience sitting as you can call it gatekeeper, right? Just making sure that there is a block up between unserious things and serious things. I wouldn't call myself a gatekeeper per se, but he's now an influencer with 60,000 people following him or something like that. And people, despite never having talked to him, really think they know him. And they don't know him at all, even though they're listening to him 3 hours a day. They don't know him, but they think they do because they have been listening to him. And this is dangerous in some form. I really do think that we need some kind of way, if we're looking utopian at it, that we need a way to limit the interaction for people in a perfect society, because it's not healthy that you can be listening. We are sitting in Scandinavia now, right? And we are listening to a guy near London who has gathered up 60,000 followers. It is not a healthy relationship that is going on there. But that's how our world is now. So right now we're doing that. But if we had a perfect world, this kind of interaction should be limited to people that was only in your own city or in your own community, and maybe some kind of regent that had a responsibility for a larger area. But it
I
is
agree.
really unhealthy.
I agree. All of these things in a perfect world should be taking place in real life, really. And if you're not already into the concept of basket weaving, as it's been called, you should subscribe to my channel, because there might be something on that in the future. Or you should check out the basket weavers, seek out their websites or their channels on Discord and Matrix, etc. Because there's no replacement for the real thing, not at all. I have friends in real life who are either reactionary or accelerationists, and the fact that in a society that's so left wing, you have someone you can turn to just in everyday conversation that you have a basis like that with is wholly something different than relying on some random guy on the internet. And I'll say that's interesting, Green River, what you're saying, considering that most of the image of academic agent is being a misanthrope, that still, saying fuck the fans, so to speak, it's not enough. That parasocial relationship is so powerful.
Yeah, that's my experience. They insert their own values into him because they don't know him well enough. They just have this parasocial relationship, and that's okay. And I even do it myself too, right? Sometimes I think that he has one view, and I'm trying to describe that view to people so they can understand it, and I put my own values into that. Because most of the time people are just flying on really sparse information about what they think he believes. And I do it myself too.
Yes. Soup is saying, yeah, real relationships are much nicer. AA is more of a lecturer than a virtual friend, though. Yes, that's right, but it doesn't, that doesn't help with the problem. It doesn't change anything. Just saying that, oh, it's a lecture, it doesn't take away that parasocial relationship, because that outline of a person is still going to be made, because at the end of the day, you're human, and that's what you do, because social interaction is how we survive. It's built into us, regardless of how evolutionary you want to look at it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can just reiterate basically what you just said there about so-called content creators online, which is, I mean, I really despise the term content creators because it sounds very empty in spite of the implications there. But like Millennial Woes is a guy I've followed for quite a few, like 4 or 5 years probably, and he used to make a lot more personal videos, like hour-long videos, like one he titled The Abyss, which really in a way helped me out because I was way down in the mental gutter there for a while. And like he's said this himself, like his viewers know him, but he doesn't know them. But I do think that's true to an extent. Like his viewers do know him. Certainly not to the extent they would in real life at all, of course, but to some extent. And yeah.
Yeah, no, it's almost like, I think if you talk to any self-respecting theologian or priest, they would say something to the effect of it's easy to know about God, but it's another thing to know God. It's two different ways of looking at it. One is, knowing something about someone else, but knowing who they really are is something entirely different. It's quantity versus quality in a sense. It's data versus experience.
Yeah, I also had one other example because Norm Macdonald died late last year or September.
Right.
And I mean, he's a quite enigmatic character, but he had a lot of screen time. So it's strange because, of course, didn't know Norm Macdonald, but like everything from like humor, of course, is very avvæpnende in Norwegian. I mean, it's very like
disarming.
You let your guard down when you laugh, and something really clicks in some way. And then he also has more serious interviews with Larry King and stuff. So I'll be honest, when I heard Bob Saget, who, rest in peace, by the way, just died as well. He had this eulogy, this like 40-minute video. And I will admit I did shed some tears when listening to that, even though I didn't know him at all. And like the same with David Bowie as well. Like I didn't cry or anything, but when David Bowie died, it was strange. It's like, okay, we're living in a world without David Bowie now. It's a game changer. So that speaks to the power of mass media.
Yeah, I mean, people like David Bowie is sort of, I mean, he was sort of a phenom as well. It's a sort of very unique character, whether you thought he was kind of politically interesting or not. You have some of these people, the culture sphere, that it's like you get a person like that maybe once every 100 years or something. So
that's true.
Okay. So we've gone for about an hour and 15 minutes. In my notes, I have the possibility of talking about virtual VR, pornography, and then it's the movie Existence, David Cronenberg. Do you want to do both of those points, or should we do one of them and skip to the movie?
So I don't know what you feel like, but I mean, this picture did make me think of more of the pornographic points. Not that I'm like a kiddie diddler, but in terms of the access to pornography, because you see, I mean, as soon as these kids have the smartphones, they are basically like 3 clicks away from every bit of like hardcore pornography they want.
True.
So in as sort of prep for this one, I sort of had to try to read myself up on the Norwegian history in terms of pornography, and I mean, it was pretty interesting. There wasn't that many books that I could find, but I ended up like watching the sort of 4-part documentary. It was quite painful, honestly. Came out on TV2 not too long ago, but I could just go through like this sort of quick summary of it.
With the summary.
Yep. But and that's just, it goes a little bit outside of the digital stuff, but you can just sort of see how it weaves into the digital technology eventually.
I think it's relevant because I think the amount or the the issues of pornography that we see today wouldn't be present without the digital technology to act as the vehicle, so to speak. Because the Coomers always make the distinction that, or the argument that, oh well, but pornography has existed forever. Like all humans make pornography, yeah, but not at this scale and not at this accessibility, not even close, right?
There is a question of degree there. It's not. It's not
At some point, degree matters.
I think it's a little bit like food has always existed, and this tools have always. I mean, it's completely pointless. But just a quick rundown of the history of pornography in Norway. Is that just like if we go back to the previous episode, the first porn actually comes in from America, like with the Marshall Plan. That was part of the things that they sent in. It's like the Ivige Amerikaner.
That's deeply subversive. I didn't know that.
No, but I mean, it was pin-up mags. It wasn't sort of hardcore stuff, but it is just okay. They got these magazines with pin-up girls. So that's where it starts. Then there's, I mean, Norway was like deeply anti-porn, deeply conservative from like the 1940s. And in the 1950s, there were certain books that came up, like Den røde rubin and some other books. And there was like these large court cases going on. And I mean, this was just literature. There wasn't any imagery. There was nothing graphic about it. But you basically had like court cases about erotic novels being legal or not. And then we start moving into the 60s, like the end of the 60s, where the porn industry starts picking up with people who are importing porn. Like you have these sort of cowboy people. Like I'm not like literal cowboys, but you have a certain archetype of more of like a less polished adventurer person who's going to be the early adopter, but who's not going to be like the professional, business operator. Where people they would go over to Sweden and buy these kind of discount porn magazines or porn mags that they would throw away, and they would just put like hangers full of them. Buy them at like 20 öre per magazine, and they would sell them for maybe 50 to 70 kroners at Narvis, and then try to use these sort of distributing networks. So and that was sort of okay. Then it started to be distributed. Like you could go in a kiosk and buy a porn mag. And of course, this set off like this large culture war because the feminists got in on this, and the feminist movement then in Norway, in the 70s was very strong. And it wasn't like today where you have this like a Twitter mob of feminists. I mean, you had actual large mobs of women that would walk into the streets. Like they would go into like Narvis and just occupy the place. They would go and break windows. They would just set fires, smash property. They would just, take a pile of porn mags and just sit and burn them in the street. And, they take them into court and they wouldn't even pay the fines. So they were just using physical intimidation to try to stop porn distribution. The problem, of course, is that people in our spheres run into is that, you have people that agree with us for the wrong reasons. So the feminist movement, in the 70s, their argument is that basically porn is going to turn Norwegian men into rapists, and they're all going to be raped. And that was sort of the argument. And there was something about, this is exploitative towards homosexuals and these kind of things. And I mean, they have the right idea, but the arguments that they're bringing forth are basically wrong. It's like the Christians with like when you were going into the sort of 90s gaming craze, where like the Christians say
like
that if you play
correct, but the arguments are wrong.
Yep. Where these like you have like this kind of Jack, I don't know what his name was, Jack Thompson, who says if these kids play GTA 4 or something, they're gonna go and shoot up the school. They're gonna kill everybody. So I mean, so there is this period where the feminists are able to intimidate some of these kind of porn barons, and they distributes the chain of supply for a while, and they're able to. It seems like they're winning the battles, but then it's sort of like there's some Supreme Court decisions that actually overturn a lot of laws on censorship when we get to the 90s, and new technology is starting to come in. Like you're starting to get television VHS tapes, and then the internet comes in with internet pornography. A lot of these cowboys just go out of the game, and you get a lot more of these sophisticated actors, like these sophisticated business people who really know what they're doing, who have distribution networks, like they have connections to lobbying, and like by the time it's on the internet, the battle is basically lost for them. And like the feminists were basically like they were sidelined or sort of flanked by new technology. So it's just sort of come in to Norway, and there's been discussions about it, but nothing comes of it. And they always rest on these sort of Supreme Court arguments about freedom and freedom of speech. So the feminists were able to make prostitution illegal, but they weren't able to make porn illegal. So they won battles, but the battles were made meaningless by the new technologies and the new distribution networks that came in. So where we are at this point is that Norway, I mean, at least according to the documentary, it's very hard to get good sources on porn consumption and exactly how much people are using, but it's apparently extremely widespread. And they said that Norway is like one of the top countries, say per capita of porn use in the world.
You sent me a
right?
link to a study that Pornhub had done.
Yes.
And it said that Norway consumed like 60% more porn than other nations. Was that correct? Something like that. It was like a wild number.
It is quite possible.
I don't want to open that on the stream, understandably, but
no. But what they do get out of it, I mean, the arguments that they made in terms of why the porn use is so high is because Norway's a rich country. And so everybody's going to have a smartphone, like you see with these kids. And the average age where a kid gets a smartphone in Norway is about between 8 to 10. So 8 to 10 years old, and people have large houses in Norway with private rooms, and that's not something to take for granted. Like you have people who like families with like 5, 6 that all they just share the same room and they sleep in the same bed. So in Norway, it's like you have the private time, you have the time off from work, and you have the access to the pornography. And then it's especially if you're locked up or if it's dark outside, then it's like the plenty of both time and opportunity to sit and explore this sort of very, how should we put it, this kind of deviant world of pornography. So the case that the reality of Norway at this point is that the average teenager or the average person is going to lose their virginity at 17 years old. So that means that they're going to have been watching pornography for maybe 5 to maybe 7 years before that happens. I mean, if you're meeting now, like if you're meeting a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old on the street in Norway now, you're basically talking to a person who's probably like watched more kind of hardcore pornography in their lives than their parents had, or maybe than you have. Possibly, like they'll have seen stuff that you probably wouldn't even have wanted to touch on. So it's a quite of sort of uncomfortable thing to think about. And when I'm watching this documentary, it's like, I think of myself in the past, I might have been upset with like, oh, these feminists and all this stuff. But now I'm just sitting there cringing at these, at all of these sort of liberal lawyers that they're bringing out and talking about, well, now we finally have real freedom for people to express themselves sexually. And, think about all these positive opportunities we have through the pornography and so forth. I mean, it's just, in my view, it's just pure idiocy. This is just a kind of digital slavery almost, where people are just getting, it's like you're introducing a drug to them at a very young age. And this is going to be like a sort of mental and physical problem for them through their entire lives. I don't know if anybody else has any take on this.
I think you probably said everything that I wanted to say. I don't think there's anything more for me to say. I think we probably all agree that, something like, regardless of what you feel about porn, the way it is now and the way it indirectly affects real life and dating for young people through like Tinder and stuff. I mean, it's not sustainable.
I mean,
obviously.
Viagra has basically become sort of like you can get Viagra now at a pharmacy without getting a doctor's note. Just inexplicably that happened. So because there's a sort of epidemic of like erectile dysfunction among young people. So I guess that's one of the side effects of this. Of course, these sort of like liberal people are just going to sit and deny every point. Like they're just going to, well, you got to study on that kind of crowd. But I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? It's sort of I don't know what else would be causing these. Would be causing all of these problems, and like the sort of prolonged male virginity, the sort of social atomization, all of these sort of weird, social awkwardness, and all of this sort of, I don't know,
Right.
it's just a can of worms. Because I remember I was talking to a person one time who was like a digital psychologist who worked for BetterHelp.com, where you basically, it's like this sort of digital service where you sign up and you can talk to a psychologist over sort of screen sharing. And he said that half of his clients, like men and women, half of them come there because of porn addiction.
Oh, really?
And the number is basically increasing. So, but yeah, I could go on about this stuff, but it is a little bit. It is sort of painful, and not just that, but the fact that people have kind of accepted the reality of it, like this sort of narrative of, well, there's so much money in it, and the technology is there, and everybody's using it, and yada yada yada, so we can't do anything. It's a pretty funny argument to make in the year we live in now, the year of our Lord 2022, when they've basically been like censoring. They've ran around the internet censoring everybody who has like a differing opinion on the current, medical.
Sorry, Lyric. I mean, it's the same sort of argument you hear regarding technology. Like, well, this is an unstoppable force. It's just gonna keep going whatever you do. And unfortunately, I sort of. I'm afraid that's true, but Arnenes has a few, I don't know if I want to call it white pills, but I mean, obviously he wrote in the early mid-1970s as well, but he underscores the fact that technology or technique, I think maybe he uses technique in an Ellullian sense, like Jacques Ellul, and I'm not versed in that, so, but he makes the point that this is a choice that society makes. And if you want, I can just read, he's a much better speaker than I am, obviously.
Yeah, hit us.
It says, whether the change of a technique is a good for society depends on a comprehensive social assessment. Improvement of technique means improvement within the frame of a cultural pattern. Whatever threatens this frame is not perceived as an improvement and is discarded. He means it should be discarded if it is not in the industrial society, such social considerations are not taken. And then further down the page, it says technology is chosen, but not from considerations to the society as a whole. The choice is socially uncritical. So yeah, same thing. But I guess there's a feeling in general that, the world just rolls on and there's nothing we can do to stop whatever changes are occurring. And as Arnenes here points out in other places in the book, it's going to take a radical political solution.
Well, I'd also say that on the point of technology being societally chosen, so to speak, there's a bit of an perversion of that. And of all the things we talked about academic agent earlier, and of all the things that he's influenced me with, the worst one is the meatless stuff he's been on lately, because I can't stop noticing the fucking all the plant products that they're pushing. And that's one of those things that feel very artificial. Like, that feels like technology that's not emergent, quote unquote.
Exactly.
That's not being chosen by society. It's being chosen by the regime.
Well, it is being chosen by the regime, and it's very easy for the regime to just sit and, this just happens spontaneously, and that's the story. It's like the liberal fiction of the spontaneous organization, which, of course, I'm not against that framework of the emergent social construction theory, but you see it with. I just go back to you look at the documentary "The Century of the Self." So they talk about these transitions, like we talked about in the last episode, where they started with the post-war kind of FDR era of the Keynesian kind of controlled economics, where this sort of collective industrialization, and then it shifted to privatization and more neoliberal thinking, and now it's going into sort of like this kind of post-human thinking and this sort of kind of digitization society. And it's not just the technologies that are coming in and spontaneously changing people. This has been a concerned effort from the top down to change people's mentality. And one of these articles that I linked, that I sent you a link to, that is on, I mean, it's just it's some private company that's talking about what digitization is. Because the government line of digitization, if you go on like the government's website in Norway, is that we're just going to change the analog technology to digital technology, and we're just going to go from using the phone to using a chat application, and instead of having a file archive, we're going to go in the cloud. But this article goes on about like, no, digitization is really more about changing the mindset of the people who work in the private and public spheres to kind of accept digital technology and accept a new way of doing things, where the business is kind of the software, like the business is the technology. There's no separation between those two things, and it is the technology that's going to make the decision, and the artificial intelligence that's going to be making the decisions. And then people are sort of more conditioned to accept that mindset. So I believe wholeheartedly, like this is like a top-down effort.
Yeah, here we go. I was just bringing it up, but I remember reading it and thinking, well, that a lot of this is very insidious in a way. And as you said, very top down. Now, this is in Norwegian, so I just auto-translated it, so we're not going to read all of it because it's probably very like poorly translated. But as you said, it gives an impression that all of this is very top down. Okay. Let's hit virtual reality, and we'll use that as a jump off point into talking about David Cronenberg's Existence. Sounds good?
Yep. So does anyone else have
really
a
love
take
this
on this
picture. It's I don't know, it's just so perfect. Someone in the comments said that like the fat guy in the middle, he really like ties the entire thing together. I don't know what to say. It's just such a funny picture because it feels like one of those. It's supposed to tell me that the future is now, but at the same time, it's just very silly and sad.
Yes, that's what I'm wondering about too. If the people who took this picture, like if Zuckerberg looked at this and he approved this and was like, "Oh, this is a great photo," it's really showcasing the future and how exciting everything is going to be. Like I think for a normally mentally adjusted person, this just looks like you said, it's either ridiculous or it's insidious. So, I mean, does any one of you own a VR headset?
No.
I do actually. I
Never.
got one through work because I've done some VR projects. And I will say, from a technical standpoint, which is sort of brings me back to the, it's not technology in itself. It's very cool and very interesting. And I'm very surprised at how easily my brain is fooled, so to speak, into thinking that, whatever is happening inside that headset is real. But I have probably not used it as much as someone who's more enthusiastic would. So I don't even know if it's like a top of the line one either. It's one that I got. Yeah.
Is it a few years ago, or is it new?
Yes, like 2.5 years or something.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of thinking that I don't want to open that Pandora's box at all. Like, not actually too afraid that I'm gonna love it, but I'm kind of thinking I don't want to even know what it's like and just be
You're not missing out.
yeah, I'm
Let me
just
tell
gonna
you
be a
that.
bitter old millennial, like Luddite, as I already am, I guess, in 40 years. And
Yeah.
just like completely, like I feel I'm a tech boomer already. So yeah, gotta keep
So
it that way, I think.
I have tested them myself. It's been a couple of years since now, and me too. I was also very impressed by a lot of the stuff you could do in it. Of course, it does put a limit because I hope that you could sort of have a bit more freedom of movement. But if you are going to move around, you need to actually have physical space you can move around in to sort of pretend you're a ninja or some James Bond hero running around inside of the simulation. But I do assume that as you're using it more, you're getting more acclimated to it, and you're getting a little bit better at telling, the difference between the kind of the subtleties of what goes on in the VR headsets and the actual world. At least I hope so. It would have been fun to because I still see it as a kind of fringe in terms of technology. For most people, it's still kind of the cell phone, like the smartphone or the desktop computer that does have a lot of the same effect. But there's just something about the VR headset, like the visual look when you look at these people, that just screams dystopia at me. So
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that's been sort of like culturally pushed. It's there's a lot of things that in theory you have the technology to do, but you choose not to because everybody's talking about VR headsets because in the 90s we were promised VR headsets, so everybody's trying to make VR headsets. But I mean, the reality is a lot sadder than what any movie or book tells you. And you can see that in this picture here. Like, I mean, it just looks insane.
yeah,
Really.
I think it is usually the best cure for this stuff is just to look at other people using it. I mean, it was the same thing for me, just like looking at this sort of like porn documentary. And then just seeing these people who are like very like quote unquote sex positive or like positive to pornography, and just look at these fucking people, and it really does cure you of the interest you have in it. So, Green River, do you have a take on VR?
Yes, I do. So first off, yes, it's definitely being pushed, but there is some sense to the push because we are. Yeah, I don't want to put an amount of years on it, but we are getting to the point where you can make VR feel really real, right? And there is tools like there's something called Omni by Virtuix that allows you to move like you actually want. You talked before about the lack of movement in VR, right? It's really bad when you're moving around. You have to point and click at where you want to go, right? But there is tools coming out. I can post it to the chat, and then someone else can spread it further on. But it's like one of those stepping machines where there's like what is it called? There's like a thing holding you in, so you can run to the sides and you can.
Oh, okay.
So
Huh.
we are starting to get to the point, and I'm not saying it's there. It might take 10 years before we are actually there, but we are starting to get to the point where VR is gonna be real enough to be in there. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying on the technical side of things, we're getting there.
Right. I didn't know they were this sophisticated. That's certainly something.
By the way, I remember like that was quite. Yeah, I don't know what I want to say there, but Timothy Leary and Terence McKenna and stuff. I was into that sort of scene. quite a few years ago now, and I remember seeing conferences from the 80s, late 80s and stuff, where they already then they were trying out these virtual reality headsets. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Leary, but like Tim Leary,
I am.
walking about stage wearing a virtual reality headset in like 1989 and stuff. So, but I guess it's exploded in recent years because it sure took a long time before they got to where they are now with this.
Yeah, we could do maybe an episode on that at one point, maybe sort of psychedelia episode on like Tim Leary and Terence McKenna. I don't know. Let's see, what's that author's name? Robert Anton Wilson. I was pretty big on for a period. I don't know if you know him, but he was very close with these people. So
yeah, like I listened to Robert Anton Wilson. I didn't read his books, but I'm vaguely familiar with his ideas, I guess. But yeah, I have read Terence McKenna and listened to probably thousands of hours, hundreds at least of Terence McKenna. So yeah,
it is a
we can talk about that.
Very interesting study into like the new left, that people like the people who were on the bleeding edge of the new left in the sort of 60s. So that's where I see this stuff starting, is that they had like a very clear, a lot of that stuff that you're seeing now, this sort of like gender neutral language. And I mean, it seems so like it's just so sad and kind of sort of unpleasant to deal with now. But I get the sense, especially like with Tim Leary, because I think he was one of the first persons to sit and talk about gender neutral pronouns and using them. But it's not in the same sort of lame way that you get it served by these sort of woke people. It had a bit more of kind of an edge to it, and it is a bit more of a sort of a complete vision that they had for this this kind of like psychedelic future.
All right, I didn't know he talked about that stuff, but yeah, it shouldn't surprise me. I mean, I have this book by Tim Leary where he specifically goes into like cyberdelics, or what you want to call it. It's quite interesting, actually. It's very far out, of course, but yeah, funny character, that guy.
So there is a lot of this really like strange, it isn't just a world that you can get lost in, this sort of like this, like you said, with the Timothy Learys and the Terence McKennas, and like you have all these sort of writers who they go into, like they go into using the psychedelics, and they go into like parapsychology and all this sort of nutty stuff that they were onto, and you get to like MK Ultra and these brainwashing programs. There's a lot to look at, and I just don't see a whole lot of that in the dissident rights sphere. I was almost kind of surprised that there's so few people who are familiar with that that sphere. So
yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I have seen some people more like in comment sections and stuff bringing that up, but they're probably
it's a hard sell, I'll be honest. Someone like me, when I post my videos, I sometimes get comments from people because, and especially since a lot of my videos were, in the beginning at least, Evola focused, you get quite a bit of overlap with, let's say, a more spiritual crowd. And you'll get some comments that are kind of like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're on a different planet than me, but I mean, go off, I guess, you know? And it's not that they're necessarily wrong, but it's just, you know, you have to have taken a completely different path than I did to end up at the same place, basically.
yes, because the overlap there is then, you know, with the esotericism where Evola comes in. And that is like the way that that is what I find is to sort of be a surprising kind of, I mean, if you look for allies and if you look for people to that would be allies to the dissident right movement. I saw this article, I think it was in Vårt Land, the sort of Christian newspaper, where they talk about people who were, okay, careful with the language, they're sort of resistant to the treatment to something, where they had sort of looked at,
I think hesitancy is the word that's
people who
used.
are hesitant, they're hesitant, yeah. And like who are these people? And they sort of expected, well, it's just going to be these kind of like right-wing loons, like it's just going to be these QAnon types. But they had a lot of people who were either like this sort of exercise jockeys, like the sort of very sort of fitness focused people, or you had people who are like more in these sort of esoteric alternative spheres, like people who go to like Rudolf Steiner school,
Right. It's the
people who are
hippies basically.
who are into yoga, and there is a pathway there from this kind of like Rudolf Steiner theosophy and pedagogy to Evola. So
Oh yeah, certainly. And I've it's one of those things. I think it's almost more like a product of the way our modern society works, that whenever you go to any sort of like real life right-wing protest, or you see it on TV, it's always this crossover with I want to say quote unquote normal people. I don't want to use that word necessarily, but people who optically present nice. They show up in suits and stuff, and then there's a bunch of hippies talking about the lizard people next to him. And I've been annoyed by that before, that it really is bad for the optics of the right in Norway. Whenever something happens, you get a lot of these people who are hard to take seriously because they're coming at it from such a different worldview.
Yep.
But in the end, I mean, more bodies the better, I suppose.
The thing is that, I mean, with Timothy Leary, that he's, when I say that he started the gender neutral pronouns, it sounds like he's some sort of establishment stooge, or he's a part of this, what do you call it? The school, what's that called? The sort of neo-Marxist.
Frankfurt School?
The Frankfurt School, but it's not that at all. Like, Timothy Leary's thing is just like, get out of the system. It's just basically like fuck the system and just move yourself out of it. And that's actually dangerous to the system. And that's the kind of the overlap as well. So
yeah, I think that's the intersection point. It's whenever you break out of it, like that's the people who are there. There's other people like you, and there's the quote unquote weirdos.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sorry, Walrus, but I'm not into like researching CIA connections and stuff. I've heard some things about Terence McKenna, which I find amusing, but Richard Nixon called Timothy Leary the most dangerous man in America, and I think that was sincere coming from Nixon. I mean, Tim Leary's whole thing was turn on, tune in, drop out of the system, as it were. So, and I mean, there's a lot of bad things probably to say about his stuff. Like there were, this is getting maybe too far into the deep lore, but the Grateful Dead sound man, Bear Owsley, he was producing acid in San Francisco and just like handing out 1.5 million doses to 14-year-old kids in San Francisco
Jesus.
and stuff. So, a lot of people probably ended up like the 70s was this hangover. Like you've probably heard of this,
right?
It's in these terms, but yeah, I don't know where else I was going with that, but well, I actually I could say that like there is something to the pure experience of it. That and I'm not into that scene or that culture anymore, but and I might have read enough Arne Næss for one day, but yeah, he goes into this as well. Like without this, well, he says there is a tendency to overlook actual experienced value, the essentially unmeasurable depth, intensity, and richness of the content of experience itself. And obviously that's something I think a lot of people are searching for in the modern world. And like they're going into the metaverse instead of like real actual experience. So it's a bit, yeah, it's not a original point, but I think it's a bit sad. That's all.
Yeah, and to add to, just for fun, you mentioned that about being the most dangerous man in America. I mean, today, what is the most dangerous? It's the today the most dangerous group in America is the can I say this? The white
Wingnuts?
Yes, I suppose. the white boomers with guns, right? So, I mean, the system is good at naming its enemies, and it's apparently clear then that the Q hippies, so to speak, is that they've been either controlled or sidelined. I see someone in the comments mentioning that. I will say too, before we go further, that I'm reading the comments and some of you are saying some funny stuff, so keep it up. It's I can't read it all out, but all right. Do you guys want to get into the movie?
Yeah, I think we could take a look at it.
Should we
Let's go,
do
yeah.
any sort of summary first? Do you want to
I have a
Should I
summary.
play-
But if Green River wants to do a summary or something, or should I do it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, you could just maybe change it to the poster if you have.
I'm trying. Oh, that's not the right file. Whoops. I need to go back to the folder. Here we go. It was a JPEG.
It's a JPEG. So yeah, you have the photo here of the two starring actors. So this is a movie directed by David Cronenberg. So yeah, the early dissection is what you expect, but he is a sort of Canadian merchant or a Canadian tribesman, and his films are a lot more, I would say, a lot more niche and more in this sort of body horror genre. So they are not, I mean, they contain a lot of the deviance and the sort of sexual deviancy and paranoia and a lot of this weird stuff. But I wouldn't say that they're not subversive in the same way that a sort of Spielberg film is subversive. Like it is basically, it is a niche thing, and you kind of know that it's a niche thing. So I don't
add
really,
that, for any horror buffs, there's a weird connection with sexuality and stuff throughout it's a thing, right?
yes.
Horror has
So-
this thing where it's that thing you have a lot of sexuality or nudity as part of the horror in a sense, not for the sexuality's sake, but it's like an art thing. Isn't
so
it?
we do body
Yeah.
horror.
I can jump in here and say a little bit more about Cronenberg. Cronenberg has the materialist view, 100% right, like any tribesman would have, and that comes really out in Existence. And we talked about, or you guys talked about the sexuality just before. You can see when he plugs in with the VR in this movie, there is a sexual element in it, right? There's a penetration and there's a hole, and so it is actually present in his work, especially in Existence, I would say. It has a large influence on his work.
Yes. So just to continue, you have the starting actress here. You have on the left, the new Pope himself, Jude Law, who is the bodyguard, Ted Pikel. And the woman is Jennifer Jason Leigh, who plays a video game designer that's named Allegra Geller, who is testing out this sort of VR type system. You have a small appearance by Willem Dafoe in this movie, and so there's also a character called Yegev Nourish, and that's going to become important later, who's played by Don McKellar. So I saw a question by Nordanon who's asking about the gun, or about what is he holding in his hand. Can you bring the question up, Walrus? See there. So yeah, that's the I guess one of the most infamous scenes in this film. So it's a recurring prop here. It's a bit a part of like Cronenberg's shtick is that they use metal detectors at places in this film. So on multiple occasions they assemble basically a gun out of completely biological material, and that's a theme that goes even the gaming consoles that they use to test this sort of VR game are basically biological consoles that are made from animal parts with organs. And you connect into the VR game with a sort of via an umbilical cord that you have to connect into a hole in your spine. So this is one of the plots in the movie, is that the character Ted Pikel here, he is a bodyguard, and there's a person who tries to kill the game designer Allegra Geller on the right, and they have to run away because there's a sort of a fundamentalist fanatic who wants to kill the virtual reality creators. And on their sort of journey away from this maniac, they have to go into hiding, and then the woman basically tries to introduce the man to this technology, and which he is not really interested in because he doesn't even have the like he hasn't pierced his back. Basically, that's something you have to do to connect to this console. You have to get like as kind of surgery, where you create a hole in your spine, and you see like the cord there on the bottom of the photo. Like you have to insert this cord into your spine to be transported into the sort of metaverse, quote unquote. So, do you have anything more on that, Green River?
Well, not besides what I said just before, but there is an add-on that in Cronenberg. Cronenberg always has this organic rubber-like element to his movies, right? It feels a bit cheap, but I think he has been developing it over the decades, to be honest, where he has got at this point he has gotten to the point where it's acceptable. It feels right.
It's sort of his signature, isn't it?
Yes,
like
it
that
is.
sort of like that's the vehicle he uses.
Exactly.
Yes, and this is a sort of thing that I mean, of course, you get a lot of UE reactions in the comments. It's totally understandable, but it's something that I've gotten to appreciate, quote unquote, a bit more as I've gotten older, because you have all this crap CGI in these films. Like you go to watch a modern film now, and it's this sort of cape shit Justice League thing where everything is just this blinking, glancing CGI. And with the directors like Cronenberg and like John Carpenter, they actually they're going to use like actual props and real looking effects. So it's like this really realistic looking horror effects. Let's see. So I'm just going to go through a bit of the plot here.
I was going to say, well, let's get back on the summary. They're fleeing this fundamentalist.
Fleeing the fundamentalist, and they basically they have to go and try to. She'll just go and visit other people who is connected to this factory, because the pod that they're using, that's in the middle of the screen there, has been damaged by the assassin. So he's sort of shooting these sort of biological, like the gun that they're using is actually firing teeth. So it's this kind of like biological gun where if you have gums or you have false teeth, they just take the false teeth out of your mouth like a magazine, and they insert it into the gun. So now, because this pod has been damaged, she will have to try to repair it, and to sort of troubleshoot the pod, they both have to go into it to go further into the simulation. So this is kind of like Inception almost. I mean, this film was made in 1999, so it's the same year that Matrix is released. And like these films they both deal with the same thematic of this sort of simulation and simulacra, but I feel like this movie gets the simulation simulacra thing a lot better, because in the Matrix you're plugged in to this machine where there's two realities. And when you wake up from the Matrix, it's very clear that, okay, now I'm not in the Matrix anymore. And they can distinguish very clearly between the real world and between the Matrix. But in this movie, they just keep moving. They go into one level of the simulation, and they have to plug in a new thing in their spine. They go into another level, and they keep just going deeper into the simulation. And they can't, at some point, like they can't even figure out what they were supposed to do there. So there's a lot of confusion in it. I feel like the movie is it can feel like it's a bit slow in the middle part, because it's just so confusing and hard to tell what's actually going on, what's real, who's actually doing what, if the people are in control of their own actions and so on. So let's see. I'm gonna have to get into some spoilery territory here to sit and talk about some of my takes on this film. But like I've been watching YouTube and seeing some of these reviews, and you have like these sort of shit takes by a lot of the people who are basically materialist and in this sort of like atheism plus crowd. And the takes is like, well, oh yeah, the movie is called Existence because it's existentialism, and it's life is whatever you make it, and life doesn't have to make sense because we just have to have fun with it and go through these things, and it's also trippy. Like it's that type of like what's his name, Camus. That's the only philosopher, Albert Camus. That's the only philosopher they know. These sort of atheist people. But what is actually happening in this in the end of this movie is that it turns out that we start the movie in medias res. So actually they were inside the simulation when the movie started, and these sort of flesh pods and all of this kind of flesh technology is actually like they're actually having a sort of metaverse headset on. And in the end of the gaming session, quote unquote, where it ends up that the woman here, that's Allegra Geller, she kills almost everybody but herself, and then she is sort of the winner of the game. Which, I mean, you're at that point, you're not even sure if you're still in the game or not. You're basically not even sure if she's killing actual people or if she's still in some sort of simulated world. But they move out of the final, at least they believe that they move out of the final level of the simulation, and they take off these sort of Zuckerberg VR headsets, and they start sitting down with these cell phones. And sort of the twist ending here is that these two, like the sort of Anglo couple that's coming in here, like these two are the actual sort of Luddite fanatics who have infiltrated this beta testing session to kill the real game designer, whose name is like Yevgeny Nourish. That it sounds like this sort of Russian guy and his features are sort of a lot darker, a little sort of curly in the hair, and they come in there to basically kill him. So they shoot him, and they basically are then starting to threaten to shoot the other people, and then the movie just ends on a question where they're basically not sure if they're still in the simulation or if they're actually at the sort of final level of reality. So the kind of themes that come up here is that, like, for people who talk about the sort of the tribe, the sort of J narrative, is that this is like from that perspective, this movie is sort of it's really a horror movie for like the tribesmen, in a sense, because this is sort of about a tribesman who tries to introduce this sort of new metaverse technology to the Goyim. But there are like Goyim that have infiltrated that group who have a sort of religious like jihad or a fatwa against him for making this kind of reality deforming technology. And they actually succeed in killing him at the end of the movie. So from my view, that like this is actually the good ending from a right-wing perspective. I'm of course not just completely academic. I'm not endorsing any action, any action in this way, of course. But I mean, from the director being a part of this group himself, I can sort of imagine that this is like his projected paranoia into. I
was going to say it's always projection with the left. Remember.
What do you think about that, Green River?
Yeah, so you're largely right. I think you're missing one part, namely that Salman Rushdie and David Cronenberg was friends. So Salman Rushdie was the guy who wrote the Satanic Verses back in the 80s or something, late 80s. And then he had to flee the Middle East. And he ended out in like northern Scotland or something like that to begin with. And they issued a fatwa on him. And that is why you actually have this kind of free speech theme going through the movie, which you didn't really get into. But at one point, Jude Law yells death to the demoness Allegra Geller, right, which is his co-star, which is kind of the same kind of rhetoric that you got against Salman Rushdie. This you can see the whole VR part as an expression of free speech rather than talking about technology in itself. So I think that was actually what Cronenberg himself wanted, but he used the frame of computer games / VR to present the story about Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I'm actually glad you brought it in. And this is, like you say, that is probably the most accurate sort of historical interpretation or reason why the film ended up as it did. But I feel like it lends itself to a lot of interpretations that might just synchronistically end up working. I mean, I've seen people on the internet say that this movie was about like abortion versus pro-choice ideology and so on.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
but of course, the reason I think this movie it's maybe not intentionally, but it comes very well into this kind of like J subversion type narrative, because when we're starting the movie, the roles basically of like you have 7 participants who go into this virtual reality, and the roles of the participants have changed from what they are in real life. So when they go into this VR world, they cast the woman as the game designer, and this is not what it's like in the actual world. It's actually this sort of the man who's the video game designer, but the woman is cast as that. And with her role as the video game designer, she is sort of always in a role where she's trying to introduce this technology to the like Ted Pikel, the Jude Law character. And there is this very kind of, I feel like you see a lot of the dynamics that would have happened in especially in the 90s with people with heroin addiction, where people try to just use peer pressure and introduce people into, well, it's not that dangerous. You can just take the first shot. And there's a lot of these scenes.
It's also a bit Garden of Eden-esque.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So the game designer, like the real game designer, is then using the wasp woman to try to seduce the wasp man into accepting, like he gets his back pierced so he can get the game, and she tries to make him enjoy the game through role playing and using like getting into more or less like deviant sexual acts. But in the end of the movie, like they reject it. It's basically rejected, and the subversion wasn't successful. So
yeah, you're definitely not wrong about that. The perspective of the movie, it really fits into what we know about a certain tribe, etc. Just a technical.
Real quick, sorry, I'll just have to step away for a moment, so you can just keep going, and I'll be back shortly.
All right. A technical detail that hasn't really been mentioned here. Well, maybe this isn't the perfect place to mention it, but David Cronenberg has in his cinematography has always focused on the organic disease or whatever and then told a story about it, right? So when you look at The Fly, for instance, which is his, then you're looking specifically at the fly and what is happening with him. You're not looking at someone trying to fight the disease. You are fighting. You are following the person who is experienced this disease or whatever you want to call it, and that is actually taking on that is taking on to existence, and then you follow all of the characters in existence, which is one of the reasons why you might say that this is actually the magnus opus of Cronenberg himself.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So, I mean, there are other details about this movie that are interesting. I mean, I feel like it is the sort of quintessential 90s movie in the themes and aesthetics. I mean, it has the VR headset, like you talked about. Okay, let's got to be the VR headsets in the future. Like you have some of these movies, like the Lawnmower Man, and these sort of movies that go into this more spacey territory here. And you also have the trying to use quote unquote like creative deviancy and creative sexualities to circumvent censorship, because they involve these more kind of sexual scenes that involve this kind of bioport that they have. And from a censor perspective, that's not entirely clear how this is supposed to be classified. So you might get these censors who are like really sort of autistic in how they interpret the law, and they will see that, and well, it doesn't go under a specific paragraph that we have. We have nothing that covers like a type of bioport or a sort of biological enhancement and sexual activity that involves it. It's a bit the same. I don't know if you're familiar with Aeon Flux. That was this show that went on MTV at the time, who did a lot of similar things, that they included a lot of sexual content that was just meant to circumvent the censorship at the time.
Yeah, I didn't actually see the show on MTV, but I did see the movie, but I don't think there was that much of it in the movie.
The movie is garbage, so the show is just everything. So.
Okay, I will actually watch that then. But in regards to Cronenberg and censorship, he had large problems in Canada with censorship with his earlier movies. So that's why he's using this tool, because he was using sex and horror in his earlier movies, right? But he in this movie he tried to circumvent it, as you said. It's on purpose because he had so much trouble with it in the past.
Yes, and I mean it is like you'd say in these circles degenerate, but at the same time there is a sort of artistic creativity that comes in when people they have to outsmart the censors, and you get a lot of creative content. Because I see that with the movies today, because it seems like the standards have gotten a lot more lax, and they will just show pornographic content like directly with penetration and the naked breast and the naked butt cheek and so forth. So it just becomes lazier.
Yeah, that is true. I thought there is a scene where you have Allegra Geller, what's her name, Jennifer Jason High or something like that.
Jason Leigh.
Leigh. Okay, fair enough. And Jude Law is laying on a bed, and you can just the way she's calling on him is almost like a woman calling for sex, right? Yes, exactly. Right before they enter into that position there, the whole play is just like a woman calling for a man for more sex, right? I don't know if you noticed that, but it really is.
Oh yes, it is. It is like those are the two metaphors. It's like trying to seduce the man into sex, and another like it's like I mentioned with the drug angle, like trying to get someone into let's have fun together. There was a lot of that in the 90s. I think that coincided with the heroin epidemic that happened at the time. But if you listen to some of this sort of house music, like the Crystal Method and like the Prodigy and that stuff, there's always like this sort of underlying, come on, we just want to have fun. You just come and just have fun with me, and we'll just do drugs together and try to get into as much of this kind of really strange drug use. Maybe I'm getting way off topic
from
now.
a bit of a historical perspective. Sorry. Hello, I'm back. The 90s were very sort of, it was the beginning of the end of history, so to speak. And I think a lot of the drug use and stuff like that is colored by it. So it might be a bit of a feedback loop that leads back into this movie, in a sense. That the slide into hedonism is well on its way in the 90s, and that's something that Cronenberg is sort of tapping into.
Oh yes, I mean we could do like a special episode on the 90s. The interesting part with the 90s is that it was hedonistic, but it was at least creative hedonism. Unlike when you get into like the 2000s and the 2010s, it's just like laziness is the word that I would use to describe a lot of the content that's produced. So, but what about Wingul? Do you have a take on this? I assume you watched like half of the movie.
Yeah, I only got to the Arabian Bilbo part, and I don't know if you noticed, it's the same actor that plays Bilbo in The Lord of the Rings. And
interesting.
By the way, as I noticed, the soundtrack is made by Howard Shore. He's the guy who scored The Lord of the Rings. So, but anyway, I just have pop cultural references apparently. I don't really have anything to add at this point.
No, it's the same with me here. I'm sort of running out of narratives in terms of the in terms of the film. So unless we have some other points or something we want to spiral into, then we could maybe do some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I want to check with Green River. Do you have anything you would like to add about this film?
Nah, I could add technical details all day, but there's no point in that. Not for this stream.
Okay. Well, thank you all for participating this far. If you'd like to stick around, I mean, if anyone in the chat have any questions about what we talked about today or in general towards us, we'll see if anyone wants to post any. If not, we'll say our goodbyes.
Yeah, before the questions start pouring in, as they no doubt will, I hope, but
You give this channel a bit too much credit. Yeah.
yeah. Well, there are at least some people there. Yeah, I was wondering if any of you guys have any proposed solutions. I mean, that's a very big ask, but so that's not the correct way to put it. But
I have a bit of a cop-out answer.
yeah,
Because it's not very realistic, probably. But it ties into what you said about technologies, quote unquote, being chosen. And a little bit about what Green River says about this is, in a sense, about power. The problem is that we're not the ones making these decisions. And that sounds very simple and grug-like, but in a sense that's true. I think the ideal one would be some sort of, let's go all the way out and say that what if you put in like a council of elders that choose which technology should be adopted? Like, that's the direction we have to move in. There has to be some sort of societal control.
yeah. I mean, it's very, very difficult to see how that will be brought about. I mean, we have to presuppose a massive change.
Oh yes, but
before anything
of
takes
course,
place.
but as I said in the libertarian video, it's easy to be free when everything is in order. So we're not at the order stage yet. So that's following the Carlylean steps. We have to get to order first, and we're not there yet.
Absolutely. And coming back to, I'm just browsing through the Arne quotes I translated, and he had some stuff on managerialism and excuse me, and how that class arose. But I mean, we're past that point now. But I think that there has to be, and we're almost moving back into psychedelic sort of territory here. Not necessarily psychedelic, but there has to be a massive change in consciousness, I think, in some way. There has to be this. I mean, we need to get rid of this drive for eternal economic growth, I think, because
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could chime in maybe on that. The question is how is this going to be solved? And of course, it's something that I think about, and I've been into the same sphere, the same thoughts that Walrus brought up, is that we install a council of elders. I mean, that is almost just self-evident, is that there's gonna have to be a new elite, like academic agents talked about. We need to just put a new elite in, and through that elite, the dialectic around technology has to change. Like, I used to think that it would be possible that we could reach some kind of stasis, like the world could become like China, almost like they just want to be, okay, everybody wants to be left alone, and we're just gonna keep technology this way for 2,000 years. I think Morgoth talks about that with the sort of grim, dark nationalism, that we just we take the hit, we take the material hit, and we go back to farming. But I think with European peoples, or people from European descent, that is almost going to be impossible. Like, they are like these sort of like Faustian people who just have this constant curiosity and want to explore and try new technologies. So it is like trying to get the genie back in the bottle with them. I think it's going to be such a pain to keep them away from technology. So there has to be then a sort of a new elite that can create a new dialogue around what we're using technology for, and how this technology is used, and how change happens in society. So there were visions of that. I mean, you had like with the mid-century Italians and the bald man, like the futurism, the art style. Maybe you can bring up some pictures.
I think you mean Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Evola was very
but
into,
I want to get in. There's a couple of questions that relate to this that I'd like to get into. Aren't we heading towards the technocrats being those elders? In a sense, yes, and that's why I said part of the problem, kind of what Green River said, is we're not those people. You know, if the oligarchy forms anyway, why aren't we playing the game like it will? In a sense.
Yeah, I'd like to expand a little bit on that actually, because I think conversations like this are actually pretty useless. I mean, it's great to dream, etc., but at the end of the day, there will be like 20 factions that takes power at the same time, if it happens at all, and they're gonna fight it out, right? So every minute you spend on this conversation instead and thinking about it is a minute less that you are building power to take out those we don't
Exactly.
like, right? So instead of spending the time on this topic, we should be spending the time on how the hell are we gonna generate the power needed to take power and do something
Exactly.
about the problem.
First the regime is established, and then you can figure out what you want, really. And that's why I
Exactly.
said, like, okay, yeah, sure, if I could just will it into power, I said the like council of techno elders, that would be cool. But I mean, there's no point in talking about that, because that's, you know, you got to establish the order first, and then we can have that conversation.
Indeed.
Yeah, at the same time, I think it's important to dream, you know, just to have the motivation to keep going with these things.
Oh yeah, like,
But
but
the
it's
sort of the long
important to
term,
have like a
yeah.
sober view on it as well.
You have the you can have sort of the way I see it. You have a long term plan and a short term plan, and of course, the long term plan is like the green and golden hills and the new society we want. But the short term is just all practical steps. That's okay. What's next? What's next? Every time.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Luddic Path there. I mean, I do agree with Green River's point as well, of course, but we can't just. I mean, obviously, no one just focus. I mean, we're not focusing on that all the time anyway. Like reading Tolkien has value, even though it's not radical politics, right? I mean, it's
Of course, you have to know sort of the destination,
yeah.
but there's a time for both, you know, and yeah. The very idea of everything is not for everyone contains limits on a lot of things, including the use of technology. I think that's a very good point. I just wanted to bring that up. And that's part of the thing we talked about with the user interface was a mistake kind of thing earlier.
So hierarchies, then, you know, that's what I think about, is that you have that there are clear hierarchies, and not everybody is supposed to participate. Like there are some people are supposed to know certain things, and like other people just aren't. So.
And unlike the commies who always want to be like they want to do like poetry when the revolution comes, I'll happily accept being a peasant. That's fine.
Yes.
I can do without the computer. My life would probably be better. All right. Would total collapse be preferable to current society? Any thoughts?
I think it depends on what you mean by total collapse, because there's so many degrees. Like I would say no, because like I mean we are talking about like total collapse. Let's say like every supply line stopped functioning, everything stopped functioning at once. I mean, it would be extremely painful, and it's not guaranteed that that we could make anything good out of that either. You know, I think a lot of people like to think that they're going to be Rambo or some apocalypse king, Mad Max, when that happens. But I do assume most people are just going to do the same thing they did when society was working. You know, so I would say no.
Yeah, it's a different question, because obviously it's not gonna be better for the individual, and I'm starting to think there might not be such a big hope of I don't know, taking over the system. I mean, if you want to take over the system, you gotta really have something going before the collapse, and obviously people with money, I don't know, maybe their money is going to become worthless, excuse me, to an extent, but because, you know, it's it's really just numbers on a screen, a lot of it. But I think there may be a hope that their long arm, as it were, might not reach out to where I live, for instance.
Right.
I would like to say that again. I've been saying this a bit, but I would like to point out that again, total collapse is a utopia, and I can hear people laughing when I say that, right?
No, I agree. For the BAP sphere, it's probably a utopian vision.
Yeah, indeed it is. We're looking at a slow decline. So why are we discussing this utopian notion that we're in for a total decline?
I was
you're
going
right.
to make sort of that same point. I was going to say that before the total collapse comes the barbarians from another nation and conquers us. So it's just going to morph into something else. It's not going to be like, you could probably, if you really wanted, there's probably a way to like accelerationalist push this through somehow, but then you've sort of just destroyed like the entire West effectively, and everyone else is still the same. So I don't see a way through total collapse that's sustainable.
No, I mean, and society can always sort of get dumber and keep going. We could have done like a review on Idiocracy or something like that, but there are third world countries, and they aren't collapsed in that sense, but so they are sort of functioning, and people are living there, and there's a sort of day-to-day life that you're participating in, but it's not collapsed in that sense. It's just really stupid.
I kind of cut you off, Green River. Did you want to add anything else before we move on?
No, I was done.
Okay. Increasingly, ever more people will only have known technology from the perspective of a customer. I think we're moving towards technology being viewed as a mystical force controlled by IT shamans. In many ways, it's already doing that. And I don't think this is a new take at all, but I made that point a lot when the coup first started. And especially in Britain, it was pretty bad with the, what's his name? Niall Ferguson? Is that the name? Who was advising the government at the time. And, it came out after the fact that the model he was using to do this is basically bullshit. And a lot of the model-based, I hesitate to call it science, is that. And so what you effectively have is, this pandemic encroaching upon your kingdom, and King Boris Johnson goes to the shaman Neil Ferguson, and the shaman goes into the cave and he does the ritual, and the machine god tells him that this is going to go to shit, so we need to lock down. And then Boris Johnson locks down and everything goes to shit anyway. So in a sense, it's already happening. It was a bit of a rant.
I'm totally on board with this perspective, and I'm just repeating almost what you said. Is that especially like the people in data science who sit and do all this modeling, there's so many variables that go into it, and like you said, it's very difficult to tell if this is complete bullshit. But we are kind of back in the same dynamic that we would have in a sort of cave society, or like a sort of simple tribal society, with these these priests, high priests, or shamans, except now they have supercomputers instead of like a bowl with tea leaves. So.
Do you guys think that we can reach a point where technology will make it impossible to dispose tyranny and reestablish order for good? That's a hard one, because it's hard to limit technology. It's very often, it can be used by us and it can be used by them. But I'll see if you guys have any thoughts.
I think it can, and I think it is slowly happening right now with the COVID crisis, or COVID affair, or whatever you want to call it. They are slowly closing off the ability for other people to operate outside of themselves. You see it especially on small businesses that are being closed down now. They don't necessarily touch on the GDP, or the overall economy, because that's driven by big companies. But the small companies, the ability for a small guy to actually rise up the ranks is being closed off now. So I think it's happening.
Yes, at least outside of the system. I mean, if you're like this kind of stooge and you want to create a new tech company that makes it more efficient for the tyrants to surveillance people, then you could become a billionaire. So
that's true.
The only viable alternative is to try to build separate entities. However, that's possible, I think. Okay. Hyperborean age barbarian collapse. Right. Let's see, are there any more questions? At what age should children be allowed to have access to technology? Well, I assume he means digital technology or like smartphones, etc. I don't know, man. Like at this point, I feel that never. But that's not realistic.
No, I mean, you might have to take that position. It's going to come a time. It's in the future for me where I'm going to have to take a hard line on, say, my own kids.
Oh yeah, I know it's coming. It's just I don't like. I'm not going to get away with. You're never going to get it. I might. Like I'll try.
So it is kind of a race to the bottom, especially. I mean, if you're not living in an isolated community. So I mean, for me, it's sort of the kids are kind of on the way, so I'm not really there yet. But there is going to be, I mean, there's going to be this interesting fight in the future as to how you can sort of unpause the kids, or how exactly you can protect them, and how much it's realistic to do so. And I think if you have a kid that is very kind of smart, and if he was like I was at a younger age, they're just going to find some way to get a hold of these things through their classmates or some other way. So it's a very difficult question. But ideally, you just want to give them dumb technology, like give them a dumb phone, maybe analog technology, find some way to just kind of lock out the most damaging elements of that these smartphones introduce.
Have the panelists read Spengler's Man and Technics, by the way? I have on my bookcase in the to read section is Decline of the West, Volume 1 and 2, and Man and Technics. So soon.
I too have Man and Technics on the shelf right here. It's a very small book, so but I haven't gotten to it yet.
At the universities, you have gender shamans, says Herlock Scholz. Okay. It seems that the question has slowed down. We have reached 2.5 hours. And I think that is a good time to begin rounding off the stream. I will say that in the description down below, there is links to my Twitter. There should be at least my Twitter, my Telegram channel, which as of now is pretty much just mirroring the Twitter if you want your notifications from me there. And also the Longhouse Matrix channel, which is the sort of the shielding sphere replacement for Discord. And I encourage everyone to join there. Hopefully we can create a few more rooms and we'll get some Scandinavian memes posted. That's going to drive traffic probably. I saw some Scandinavian memes being posted earlier. It was actually pretty funny. Other than that, is there anything you want to say before we go? If you don't follow Jay Green River already, he's probably on Twitter, reposting or posting interesting stuff. I saw you posted a lot of sci-fi book recommendations all throughout, well, since the New Year's, didn't you?
I'm actually at the movies right now, but yes, for the rest of this year, that means the next 11 months or whatever, I will be posting a movie every day. I will be
Oh, sorry, it was movies. Okay.
I will be posting one every day, so 300 and I don't know, it's 56 days in a year or something like that. Movies that people can see. But if I am to shield myself, I would actually rather shield shieldings, because we are doing
Right.
an event this year in the US on the 18th of February, where we have some speakers and so on. So I'd like to shield that.
Yes, of course. If you are in the Americas watching this, you should try to attend the event. The event in Britain, I hear, was very good, and I hope it's something that can happen again, because I'd really like to go, if possible.
I won't
And,
spoil anything, but there's definitely coming something up.
All right. So I think that's it. I'll link in the chat. I keep pushing his channel if you're interested in economics, but Radical Liberation has started a stream, so I'll post that in the chat, and you can go hear about how the too big to fail concept, I assume, doesn't work. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you probably again next week, where we'll be joined by some Danes again to talk about the state of Danish politics. Take care.